You say no to life, and therefore you're not living.
I read this book before it was a movie called Yes Man, and I was like, I'm going to do this. So every time there was a job that was put to me, I said yes. I did some wild jobs. I was in a roof with this hose, sweating away, shooting insulation. Next day, I was in a tractor workshop, just sorting nuts and bolts. A few days later, I was driving halfway across the country to drive a tractor somewhere. Supply manager of a computer store. I worked at a grocery store in the Delhi.
Living in the forest, crypto portfolio. How was going in North Korea?
This extremely pretty little North Korean girl came out and confiscated my passport. She goes, "You'll get this back when you leave." And I was like,
oh, no. Welcome back to another episode of the show. Today, I am making friends with Mitch Brownlie. Mitch, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Where are you tuning in from, Mitch? Where in the world are you?
Sunny Queensland, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
Okay, so you are what, like 20 hours ahead of me right now, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you take a plane, it'll take 2 days to get here.
Yeah, sounds like fun. Well, hey, man, I gotta say, this is probably one of the more unique episodes that we're putting out, just because of the different businesses that you're involved in. So I want to ask you about that first, just so we can kind of sow a little bit of curiosity here, and then we're going to go back and build some context for everybody listening. So why don't you give me like a 10,000 foot overview of exactly what it is you're up to these days and what you how you kind of got involved in that, and then like I said, then we're going to go back in time.
I run a technology company called Selenial. It's an in-house project at the moment that we're going to be opening up to the public, I don't know, 6 months to a year. But the point of it is it's a distributed commodity supply chain platform, and not just any commodities. It's commodities that people don't genuinely appreciate, such as plastic, waste protein. And because of the data and the neural networks that we use, it actually points at commodities that have value that you wouldn't generally appreciate. And it's that information which has brought out some really interesting commodities, which I'm excited to introduce to the world.
So kind of like points out pricing discrepancies or value discrepancies in certain commodities that maybe are overlooked, and allows you to kind of position yourselves better to make more money off of those things.
Exactly, like arbitrage, basically. But my favorite is the sprouted coconut in Cambodia, because I spent the duration of COVID in Cambodia. Okay. So a lot of what I talk about actually comes from there, because there's a big part of my life. But you walk along the beach and these guys selling trinkets and jewelry and just stuff, but then you walk past sprouted coconuts and everyone walks past them. But then if you jump on the internet and you have a look at the price of a sprouted coconut around the world, you'll see that in the snowy countries in the very northern hemisphere, like Canada and Norway, they get up to around $150 a unit, whereas this fellow's just walking past them along the beach, not realizing the value they have. So Selenial will facilitate him to list his sprouted coconut, move it to the other side of the planet, and make a month's salary in one transaction. Got it.
Dude, super fascinating. I'm curious to talk a little bit more about that. But like I said, I want to reverse the clock here, go back in time. Because I find it, I've always find it fascinating how people end up where they are and what they're doing. Because it just is like, I doubt this was kind of like what you were learning about in career day when you were 8 years old, So let's go back to 8-year-old Mitch. Set the scene, set the stage. Tell me about what life was like for you at that time.
Yeah, well, I was on a cotton property in extremely remote part of Australia with my 4 brothers and a sister. We were so far from anywhere that we did distance education. It's called the Australian School of the Air. We had au pairs from overseas, so we had these young European girls coming out to our schoolroom, which was on our farm, and teaching us all how to read and write. And that actually gave us an extremely good education. But at the same time, we'd go out to the shed and hang out with the workers, who were some of the most wild, feral sort of fellas you'd ever come across. And they'd tell us all their life stories. So during the day, it was the little au pair from Europe. In the afternoon, it was these wild workers out at the shed. So it gave us a very rounded worldview.
So a cotton farm, essentially.
That's correct, yeah.
Was that kind of a first generation thing, or was that in your family for a while? Like, what made your parents?
No, third generation. So my grandfather, he was one of the first cotton farmers in Australia. He imported one of the first cotton pickers. And he had 5 boys, and they all created two cotton farms each, I suppose.
Oh,
and then
wow.
each of those boys had on average about 6 kids, which is my generation.
Wow.
And barely any of us have an interest in cotton farming. So
I can't imagine why, though.
Well, it's gambling. You're gambling on whether it rains or not. Yeah, you can make a lot of money, but if it doesn't rain, you can lose a lot of money. So if you're into that sort of thing.
So what was the plan like growing up? Was it always like were your parents looking at it as you guys are going to take this over for us someday? Or was it kind of like, hey, you're growing up in this type of an environment, but you can do whatever you want. You just got to, figure out what path that's going to be.
They were fairly they'd let us do what we want. Dad was always full of anecdotes and stories. He'd say, work hard at school, get a good job, get a flash car, do what you want. He just one thing he said, you can't become a police officer. And I was like, why? He's like, they hang out with criminals all day. So that was his only rule.
What an interesting reason. Too much access, those police officers. Yeah. What did your siblings end up doing?
Oh, so from the top to bottom, oldest brother, he's a teacher over in Norway. Second oldest brother, he was on the farm for a while, then he became a property developer. And then he had a life-changing moment, and now he's all about happiness. He's an author who writes books about happiness and does podcasts on happiness.
Okay.
Brother under him, he is a major in the army. Now he's still in the defense in the government area. Under him is me, a middle child, classic. My younger brother, he's a solicitor who helps families with legal matters. And my little sister, she works in the agricultural sector of the bank, one of the big banks in Australia.
Wow. So like literally all over the place. Everybody's doing something different. People in different countries, different parts of the world. What's the through line? Like if you look back at your childhood, can you point to a couple of things that you're like, man, I am so grateful that I learned this at an early age because of that way that we were raised. It might have been a little bit unique. It might have been kind of, uncommon. But I'm so grateful that we learned this particular thing about growing up on a cotton farm.
I think it's the fact that my whole family, from mum, dad, all of us kids, always had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. Now, I realize in the modern world, that's pretty abnormal because dad would come in for lunch, mum would have it on the table, same with the dinner, though kids would put it on the table. And you don't realize how abnormal that is. So when you grow up, you don't want to have a 9-to-5 job where you don't spend the day with your family. Now, that works on both ends of the spectrum. If you're unemployed, both your parents are both unemployed, they sit at home drinking all day, you're going to grow up to think that I'm going to sit at home drinking all day. But if you grow up in that environment where your dad works like 12-hour days, and so does your mum, because mum was our teacher as well. She was like the principal, the au pairs were like teachers. Yeah. But still, mum and dad were there all day, every day, and they weren't sitting in an office. And I think that's why me and all my brothers none of us are really employed by other people, or if we are, it's a very free sort of environment where we still have family.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty tough transition to kind of move into like normalcy from that perspective, where you had this like, kind of injection of your entire life of family time, strong work ethic, good values, and not just having those things, but having it displayed to you what happens when you decide to do those things, like the results of those things, the positive effects of strong family and having good values and working hard and all these other, you saw so many things that were displayed in front of you rather than just told to you, if that makes sense. It feels like.
Definitely.
How much labor were you guys doing?
A lot. That's why dad had so many kids, and same with all of his brothers, because we had to do all the shit jobs that no one else wanted to do, such as irrigation, for example. What
was your least favorite thing to do?
Irrigation. So you have to get out of bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, go and check the irrigation. If it's through, awesome. If it's not, back to bed, go out again, check it. If it's through, then you stop the siphons. And I actually created a little robot device, which I called a field bot. And just purely to get out of work, it would sit at the tail drain and detect water. So I had a little solar panel, 9-volt battery. And if it detected water, it'd send me a text. and say, hey, the water's through. So that was half the job done. And I was like, oh, there's still another half here. So I made another one, connected that to the irrigation pump. And so the first one would detect the water, send the message to the second one, turn off the pump, irrigation's finished. I don't have to get out of bed.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Good solution, that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the desire to get out of work will make you work so much more sometimes. You know what I mean? But
what do they say? Necessity is the mother of all invention.
That's right.
Laziness is the mother of all the others.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. If necessity is the mother, then laziness is the father. That's for sure. Oh, man. Okay. So coming into high school and things, was it a goal of yours, planned for you, for the family, to have all the kids go to college, or was that not even something that you were thinking of?
We all went to boarding school, which is an experience in itself. Anyone who's read Harry Potter, that's the closest you can get to imagining what boarding school is like, because they lock you up after hours and all the other day students are out having fun. So, of course, you become very close with your friends in boarding school.
This was like high school age?
Yeah, high school. So from grade 7 through to graduation in grade 12.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you get sent off for most of the year. You go home during the holidays. And so the weekends is when all the fun happens, I suppose.
I mean, going to university at that point, when you've already been to boarding school for 5-6 years, it's got to feel very similar, no?
Yes and no. It's so in boarding school, you're with your mates who have been there for 5 years. So they're like inmates. But when you go to college, it's kids who are day students. So it's their very first experience of being away from home.
Yeah.
So you're much more mature in the independent living than these other guys. So they want to go out and just get absolutely shit-faced, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And you're like, oh, we did that in school. I'd rather go do my homework and just relax a little.
Like, I already did that when I was like 15, man. Like, let's get with it.
So they're playing catch up, trying to prove themselves. Still fun though.
Okay, so you basically try the school thing. It's not really something that you're interested in doing. What do you do right after that? Is that you immediately go get a job? You immediately go start a business? Like, how did you start making some money when you realized that path was not going to be the path for you?
I read this book. It was a book back then before it was a movie called Yes Man. And I was like, I'm going to do this. So I learned, so I went back to my same boarding school and became a boarding master. And what that means is you just have to supervise the students for like a couple of nights a week during study. And you get to live in your own apartment. You get to have all the food in the dining room. You get your laundry done. You get to live for free, basically, in exchange for supervising.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then for work, I was doing this yes man thing. So every time there was a job that was put to me, I said yes. I did some wild jobs. I was installing, our government did this thing where every house in Australia got free insulation. So now there's like 1,000 insulation businesses. So I was in a roof with this hose, sweating away, shooting insulation. At lunch, I was like, oh, well, I said yes. I did this. I'm out, left. Next day, I was in a tractor workshop, just sorting nuts and bolts. I was like, this can't be a real job, sorting nuts and bolts. Got to lunch. I was like, this was fun. Left. A few days later, I was driving halfway across the country to drive a tractor somewhere. That was a wild, I don't know if that was 6 months. But then after that, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to join the army.
How many things do you think you tried in that 6-month time period?
Oh, there's heaps. I was a supply manager of a computer store. I worked at a grocery store in the deli, and I was the only guy there. So I just had to scrub the chicken trays. Everyone else was at the front serving and doing nice things. So I was just scrubbing chicken trays that I'd sneak into the coal room and have some of those red sausages as compensation.
Yeah, but was it better than doing irrigation back on the farm?
Yeah, yes and no. Everything has its pros and cons.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the good thing, right? Is like you went out and tried a ton of things, which I think honestly, man, I think that's just super underrated. And maybe you don't have to try that many things, but like to go like just as a young person, to just go taste things, try things, experience things. You learn a lot about what you do want to do. You probably learn a lot about what you don't want to do. But sometimes, honestly, man, like sometimes figuring out what you don't want to do is the more valuable of those two, because it can set you on a path to at least trying to figure out what the next thing's going to be, which sounds like that's really what it did for you.
100%. When I was sitting in an office working for the biggest telco in Australia as a telephone operator for people who are trying to call overseas. You'd say, Telstra, this is Mitch. What country, please? Telstra, this is Mitch. What country, please? And there was ladies there who'd done it for 40 years. I was like, wow, I can't do this. So I left again at lunchtime.
Yeah, dude, 40 years of doing that. That's wild. Okay, so the Army is next. How is you've had the unique privilege of experiencing, university, boarding school, high volume of work hours on the farm life, then being in the Army. Like, these are all very highly disciplined structures that most people don't experience anything from any of those, and you've experienced all of them. Do you think each one of them helped set you up for the next one? Like when you got to the Army, where you're like, this looks familiar, because I've been to boarding school.
I think there's a term for it. It's called institutionalization, where you're used to the small box and being yelled at, so you just go looking for it. But that's why. So I wasn't going to commit to the 3-year contract for the Army, so I thought I'll just get a taste of it through the part-time Army. Join the infantry, a rifleman, so the very bottom of the pile. I call you bullet catchers. Again, the parents are like, why don't you become an officer like your brother? I was like, I'd rather just run around and blow things up for a bit. And I thought, this basic training is going to be sweet. I've been through this before. But when you get there, the corporals recognize people like you who think that it's going to be sweet. So they come down on you like a ton of bricks. And by the end of basic training, I was done. I was cooked. They'd ruined me. There's a few different, I spent so much time polishing brass taps just for the slightest indiscretions. So like one time we were out on this overnight picket, raining, you're in your little hoochie, sleeping in a ditch full of water. And I got out my entrenching tool and dug a little trench so the water would drain out. Yeah. And a corporal came over and he goes, Recruit Brownlie, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you digging? I was like, I don't want to sleep in water, Corporal. He goes, I did not give you permission to dig this trench. And so that was the first one. And then back then you're allowed to have your phone for like 10 minutes every 2 days. And I turned it on before I got outside. Recruit Brownlie, why is your fucking pocket glowing? I was like, my phone turned on, Corporal. That was 2. And then when you get called up to the front by the RSM to get yelled at, you have to like run. And so I had my weapon in pieces because I was doing a strip and reassemble. And I just put it down and I bolted. Now that's a big no-no. You never leave your weapon out of reach. So I was at the front with a group of people getting yelled at by the RSM. And I realized I'm the only one who didn't have my weapon at my feet. I was like, shit,
no.
That's really so I finished yelling at us. And he goes, now fuck off. I was like, phew. I got halfway out the door and he goes, Recruit Brownlie, where's your fucking weapon? And I was like, so-and-so's looking after it. And he goes, so-and-so. And he goes, yes, sir, I've got his weapon. I was like, yes. So-and-so had no idea.
That's hilarious.
Oh, man, it was wild.
They got your back, though, huh?
Really good experience.
Yeah, you look on it as a good time?
In hindsight, yeah, at the time. Again, I was, by the end of it, I had to, I'd do it again.
At this point, were you kind of like questioning your decisions? Like, were you like, hey, maybe mom and dad were right. Maybe I should have gotten good grades and gone to this college and like been an officer, or like, you know what I mean? With as many shit sandwiches as you're eating at this time in your life, are you just like stoked because you know that this traditional path was never going to work for you and you don't care? Or are you more like, man, I probably should have like just done what they said to do because maybe I'd be in a better spot right now?
I think if I at any time thought back and knowing that I could be in that call center saying, Telstra, this is Mitch, which country, please? Polishing brass taps outside isn't so bad. So I think it's always about, they say comparison's the thief of joy, but man, comparison can save you sometimes.
Yeah, it's also just a matter of perspective sometimes. Okay, so now let's piece the story together here. How do you go from being in the Army to having a technologies company that helps people spot underpriced or undervalued commodities?
So there was all these, this is back when all the soldiers were coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq. All the laptops are full of sand, porn and viruses. And they knew I knew my way around computers. They're like, oh, Mitch, can you fix this for us? I was like, yep. So I set up shop across the road from the Army base. So I just had almost an unlimited supply of computers to fix.
So if it's like, this is after you're done. So you're done in the Army, but
I got medicaled out because I was at the pub one night and I was going to the pub by train, and the train comes into this building. It's called Toowong Tower in Brisbane, and it comes out on like the second or third floor for some reason. So I just walked towards the pub, and I realized, hang on, I'm on the third floor, but there's a car park. I'm like, oh, I'll just climb down. And I had this idea that you could like hang off the barrier, let go, and grab onto the second level, like in the movies. That's not possible. That's totally impossible. So I just missed the second floor and just hit the ground and broke my ankle.
Oh my
and
God.
it was the worst. And so I crawled to the pub, to the bouncer. I was like, mate, can you call me an ambulance? I think I've busted my ankle. He goes, mate, you're just drunk. I'll call you a taxi. So he called me a taxi. I went home. I woke up in the worst pain. And I was like, well, there goes that career. So fixing computers just came naturally after that.
Okay, so you were done, but then it was just like, well, this just makes sense because the army needs work on these things anyway. I know how to do that. Let me just do this for a little while.
It's just anything so I didn't have to go back to an office.
Yeah,
that I could just go around. And then so I had enough customers just going house to house. This is where I learned the power of the media. Is I just sent a journalist a text message saying, hey, come look at me. I'm fixing computers. And they did. They took some pictures, put in the newspaper. And then so I had a shop. But a shop, you only need so much space to fix computers. And there was this big front section because there was an old pizza shop. I was like, well, I can't have customers walking through this empty front section. So I bought a bunch of old computers and started an internet cafe. But no one was using the internet cafe. The soldiers had their own stuff. But kids from the hair salon next door would come in and play on the computers. But at nighttime, they still weren't making any revenue. So I was looking at different ways. And I came across folding proteins. I think this was 2010 or 11. And I came across this thing called Bitcoin. And I was like, right, I will try these out. Started mining Bitcoins on the CPUs and GPUs. At the end of the week, I think I made like $70 worth of Bitcoin because they were trading for like, I don't know, 10 cents each or something. And then I got my electrical bill and I was like, well, stuff that, not doing that anymore. And then stepped away from Bitcoin. And the hair salon next door, she closed down and her kids stopped coming into playing on the computers from her customers' kids. So I went to the owner of the building. I was like, hey, what happened to your hair salon? And he goes, oh, she stopped paying rent. But I was like, but all her stuff's still in there. He goes, that's what happens. I was like, well, I could take it over. How hard is it? I was thinking I could start a barber shop. There's all these soldiers across the road. He's like, mate, go for it. I was like, sweet. So I asked my family what I should call it. My sister's in Sweden at the time. She goes, call it Clipped. It's Swedish for haircut. So I made this logo. Back to uni when I was studying law for that small amount of time. I remember this interesting caveat in the Australian alcohol liquor legislation. You don't need a liquor license for a limousine, a retirement village, or a barbershop. I was like, okay, so we're going to offer beers. You get a haircut here, you get beers. Told the media. That caused a huge uproar because people thought I was some young kid trying to flout the liquor laws, and they tried to get me shut down. And people were like, no, he's well within his right to do that. So then this barbershop, again, didn't have a lot of money to rub together. So put an ad on Gumtree. You guys call it Craigslist.
Okay.
The only fellow who applied was this Libyan guy who didn't speak any English. But he learned to cut hair in the Libyan army. I was like, that's cool. I go, all your customers are going to be soldiers. They'll love it. And they did. And so that was the first business where I come in at the end of the week, take cash out of the cash register, give Kamal his money. And I was like, oh, that's how business is supposed to work. Whereas I was next door slaving away fixing computers. So I just decided, okay, I'll just replicate this everywhere. I opened a bunch of barbershops offering beers. The breakthrough was when I found out about fit-out fees, that shopping centers, one of them was like, what's your fit-out fee? I was like, I'm not paying a fee for a fit-out. I'm like, no, we'll pay you. I was like, oh, will you? Okay, righto, much. But then, so I'd moved away from the computers. I didn't know how to cut hair, but then I realized it was a very high-quality luxury brand, but I realized that the margins are much better with women. So we pivoted to hair salons. Long story short, having a whole bunch of hair salons and a whole bunch of hairdressers when you're an army/computer dude, very bad match. It's like having 20 girlfriends who hate you. Yeah. So long story short, finished up there and I was like, I just want to go live in the forest. So I closed them all down, sold off the business and just went and lived in the forest for a year.
That is so crazy, bro. First of all, did you keep any of the Bitcoin?
Yeah. So During that time, I also became heavily involved in Ethereum. When the white paper came out, I sent it to my mate Jack. I go, Jack, this is going to be huge because it's a trustless system. And he couldn't understand. So I wrote one of the first Ethereum contracts. It's called the Mitch Jack bet. It's probably still around on the internet. Just to explain, say, hey, we can make a contract where I bet you that the price of Bitcoin is going to go above $2,000. And we both put some money into this contract, and then it'll self-execute on the date that we set, and then it'll pay out. And there's nothing on God's green earth that can stop this contract from executing. And he finally understood. He goes, this is going to be huge. I was like, you're damn right, it's going to be huge. So we went all in on Ethereum. So while I was out living in the forest, I was just watching it go from 30 cents to $7 and that's how I was able to spend the next few years floating around the world, going to all these wild places like North Korea and Antarctica and Africa. And that's when I got involved in politics.
Holy shit, dude. So really, like, you kind of stumbled on Bitcoin a little bit on accident. And then because you actually understood the technology, you were like, oh, this actually has a lot of legs. This is not just something that, like, techies are sending to each other. This is going to be something that actually does really well in the future.
Exactly. Because I think everyone discovers Bitcoin and crypto once, but then later they come back and discover why. And it's when you understand the politics, the economics, currencies, then you're like, oh, okay, now I get it.
So you are building a real business. This is the first real business, the hair salon. But obviously did not enjoy it. You are at odds with employees or contractors, and then basically realize, like, I do not want to be doing this. How did I do this to begin with? I'm out. And then so you sell off everything. But like at that time, did you already have enough Bitcoin? Or like at this point, are you living off of the money that you made from selling the business? Or are you living off of money that you're making through the appreciation of your crypto portfolio?
At this point, Ethereum hadn't gone anywhere yet. I was excited if it got to $7. I would have been.
I was gonna say, what year was this?
Oh man, whenever Ethereum came out, 2017, 16,
okay,
around that time, because Ethereum was like 6 years after Bitcoin.
Yeah, so 14.
When I was out living, because I was living in this wild area of Queensland, it's called the Blocks. It's where people go if they want to disappear. Like Slab City kind of, but with trees. In the middle of a gas field, just had a portable building there with a satellite dish, just reading books. I think I was living off Dogecoin at the time. We got through that before Elon jumped onto it. And yeah, but then Ethereum went up a bit, and that was enough to go and start exploring the world, because there was this point where I became very politically inclined. One, I was living in a gas field, so I could see the clouds glowing at nighttime from the flames. And then also everyone else, I'd want to go out and do something. And they're like, oh, we got to work. And I realized there was this fence. I was suddenly outside the fence, and everyone else was inside because they had the mortgage, the ball and chain around their ankles. And I kind of was like, this sucks. Everyone's basically slaves. They all live in this system, and I'm out here floating around doing what I want. I was like, this isn't the way to live.
Before we dive a little bit further into that, just because I'm curious, do you remember how many ETH you had at this time, like right when it was popping?
Yeah, I don't know if I should tell you though.
Okay,
I think it's like
it's up to you if you want to. What's that?
It was like 8. I think between 8 and 10,000. That was how many I bought in the pre-sale anyway.
Oh my gosh! So yeah, you did okay on that. Did you keep a lot of that stuff? Like, are you mostly still in crypto?
I dipped out of crypto. I kept the assets, but I stopped being interested when I call it the Bitcoin coup. I remember the day. It was when Satoshi handed over to, I think it was Gavin or someone, and then basically it was this block size debate. My understanding is the block size used to be dynamic, and then there was so much spam that the network filled up. And then Satoshi, I think, fixed the block size to 1 megabyte. And there was this massive debate because the blocks were getting full, the fees were going through the roof. I thought it was so obvious. So let's just go to a dynamic block size. Massive argument. Back then, you could see that people learned how to control narratives on the internet. And you could see that there was this, what I thought was a fake narrative pushing this solution, which didn't make sense, which was a 2 megabyte block size with side chains. And I was like, there's no way that they're going to do this. It's going to hobble the network and take it from a currency to a settlement layer. And it did. It happened. I was like, that sucks. So I was like, man, stuff Bitcoin. And then Ethereum, it was the DAO. The DAO was awesome. It's the first distributed autonomous organization. And we had all these ideas of all these, because you could run a business with no ownership, no one to be prosecuted. It was just a truly distributed organization, and revenue gets paid out. Put a bunch into that, it just went parabolic. But then, because it was the very first DAO contract, it got hacked, and everyone scrambled because it affected so many people. They forked the entire Ethereum network, and I don't know if another DAO came after that, but it lost its steam. And I was like, yeah, crypto is fun. I'll come back to it in a few years.
Yeah. What I was going to say, what's your thoughts on crypto now? Are you pretty bullish on the future? Are you like, what would you recommend people listening to this?
So this relates to my time in federal politics. Is as long as there's no World War III, if the internet goes down, crypto goes down. So if we can keep the internet up during whatever conflagration hopefully won't happen, then it'll survive. But if enough of the internet goes down, this sounds insane, but you have to consider it. Enough of the internet goes down. For starters, Bitcoin's got the difficulty problem that if half the miners go offline, there won't be enough to bring the difficulty down for the other half. But also, if the internet gets fractured enough that you've got these country sovereign internets that even the Bitcoin protocol or crypto protocol can't penetrate, then suddenly you can't send money to this particular country. And that kind of, again, defeats the point of it.
Kind of fractures the network.
We're at an inflection point. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it is an inflection point. And if we survive that, $1 million Bitcoins. If not, very sad world.
So, I mean, at that point, you're not really super concerned about your Bitcoin portfolio. You're kind of concerned about getting food. Like, so you're basically saying, like, barring any sort of like crazy black swan event that that may or may not happen, like probably still should be putting your money in that because it's probably going to continue going up.
Also, silver. That's the thing. If you want to go up, yes, but if you want to just keep your store of value, I'm all about that silver. We won't get into the weeds with the issues with silver.
Okay, I'm curious about. Someone else just told me this recently. Actually, that they were bullish on silver and they were buying up some more silver ETFs. Why silver comparatively to other precious metals or other commodities?
Well, every time there's manipulation in a market, you can take advantage of that manipulation. That's one thing. But even like the Hunt brothers tried to, because when we start talking about these gemstones later, silver becomes very relevant. The Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market because they saw the same situation. Their law was literally changed to stop them from doing it. But then when you look at modern technology, silver is actually extremely important ingredient in technology. So not only is it heavily manipulated, but it's also extremely useful and as a store of value. And then over the recent weeks, if you've seen gold doing this, silver doing this, it's an opportunity.
So you think silver should be tracking gold's growth, but it's currently not.
It should be outperforming. Well, not dollar per ounce.
Sure.
But it should be outperforming gold. Yeah.
Just based on cultural, societal indications that you've seen.
And technology. Think of all the electric vehicles that are going to come on the road.
Yeah, just like the sheer volume.
Needs silver.
Yeah, like it's not as rare as gold, but it's just there's so many more use cases for it besides putting it on your body somehow.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, dude. So living in the forest, crypto portfolio, and then getting into politics at this point. We're with the right part of the story here?
So you go to all these different countries and you see all sorts of different political setups all through Africa, where you and a bunch of your mates can just walk in and take over the government, assuming your mates are in the army. You've got countries like North Korea, where they're so cut off from the world, they have no choice but to be self-sufficient. And
how was that? How was going in North Korea?
It's simultaneously, like, I'm sure everyone's seen those Vice stories where they say it's like a fake tour, which is true. But they can't fake the entire country. So you arrive. I wasn't going to take the Korean airline, nothing against it. I just prefer to take the train from Beijing. You arrive there, and this extremely pretty little North Korean girl came out and confiscated my passport. And I was like, because you'll get this back when you leave. And I was no. Oh, of course they send the pretty girls to do that.
Yeah, right.
And so we became good mates throughout the trip. I can say this. I was like, one day I'll be Prime Minister or President of Australia and I'll make you the North Korean ambassador. They'll probably hold me to that. They probably recorded that somewhere. So you travel around the country. You can wander off on occasion. This is just after two things happened. That American guy, what had happened to him happened, and Trump had been there. Man, they love Trump. You go to this museum there, and they have it's a museum of all the gifts that have been given to the leadership. First, I went to look at the Australian section. Someone, I don't know if it was a joke, they sent them a rock. It's like a mining executive. The only president they have from Australia is a rock. Obviously nothing from America or any of that. But then you come to this room, gigantic picture of Trump meeting the leader. And they're so excited. They're like, finally, we can have peace with the South. And they tell you, oh, we've connected our highways. We've connected our railways. We've connected this and that. And they tell you the system that they want to have, which is like 2 parties, 1 state. And they go, Trump's going to help us get this. You're like, wow, you guys really like this guy. So good on you. But what I really took away from it was they call it the Juche system, which is self-sufficiency. We all know that they've got their own operating systems, but they have to. They like grow food everywhere in that country. Like on the median strips, there's food. Everyone's still skinny. And these other concepts, which I've never heard of, they took us at this thing they call the coastal barrage. I was like, what the hell is a coastal barrage? And we call it a coastal reservoir. What they do is they dam off the mouth of this massive river. They say, oh, it stops the American submarines, but also has this benefit of it floods the entire river all the way inland and increases their farming area by orders of magnitude. And I was just thinking, man, Australia's got water problems. And up in North Queensland, if we even dammed one of our rivers, it would back up. And I was like, man, these guys have got some good ideas. But then obviously terrible. I won't get into the terrible things because we all know it. Yeah. And I was also there on the 70th anniversary of their party because I wanted to see their like their goose-stepping military parades and the tanks in the streets. Yeah. So into this thing called the mass games. And I was supposed to be in what they call the VIP section, but they moved us. And I was like, it is what it is. I'm not going to argue with these guys. And then, so you're in this, it's the biggest stadium in the world. It's full. Half of it's like sparkling green and gold from all the military and their brass. The other half, civilians who can be there for some reason. And on the other side, it's that big TV screen with the flip. Like you got I don't know how many people with little flip books that becomes like a big LED panel. Yeah, it's just insane that that's their job and that a boss can make them do that. Different subject. And then so I was sitting there just lamenting that they moved us away from the good seats. And then everyone just around me just like exploded. The noise was like nothing. And it's like, it was like 100,000 people just going insane. Look around to my little minder. She had tears in her eyes. I'm like, what is going on? Turns out the boss, he'd just walked in with his lady friend and they were sitting just over there. And these people had never seen him before. He's like a God figure to them. And I was like, wow. And it's just an insane, surreal experience. And that experience just kept happening for the next hour. Fireworks, instead of being inside the thing firing out, they fired the fireworks from outside. So they detonated inside the stadium. I was like, that's cool. And it was the first time I saw a drone swarm coming over. I think this was 2018. Drone swarm came over, did like all the drone stuff. And I was like, wow. But then you're like, these guys are all like, it's like going back to the Middle Ages where you've got a king who tells his people to do stuff. Right. Yeah, it is what it is. But surreal experience.
Wow. That's wild. Okay. So sorry, I interrupted you. So you're saying you were going, it was crazy seeing all these different world systems. You went to Africa and it was like this. You went to North Korea and it was like this. So anyway, yeah, continue.
Back to Australia. I was like, I need to get into politics. And I didn't really know my political position at the time. So I just went and knocked on the door of the 3 political parties that came to mind. We'll call them red, blue, and orange. The 2 big guys, they're like, not interested. This little party, they're like, sure, come on in, answer the phones for us. And I was like, this is kind of chaotic. This is, because you'd expect it to be like organized and run like a tech company or something. But it's all over the show. It's like things come along, things pop up. You have to react. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. But their political belief system didn't resonate with me. I was like, nah. Someone told me you need to be comfortable in the tent that you're in, and I wasn't comfortable. So I went to this more central party. And it's just the way things happen. I was like, it was the day after the election, and I was like, I'm going to get involved. So I became a member. I was like, okay, what do I do now? It's like, well, I'll go to the convention. And they sent out the email for the convention, and they said everyone should apply if they want any of these positions. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll apply for a position. I didn't realize I applied for the Policy Standing Committee, which is like the committee at the top. And so you take a picture, you write a little bio of yourself. I was just this young guy, and they called me up and they said, hey, you've been accepted to the Policy Standing Committee. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Why? And they go, oh, well, there's one seat which represents the general membership, and we'd like you to be in that seat. It's like, oh, cool. Okay. So I went to the top. And then after that, I was like, what else? What other positions are there? And there's all these policy committees. I was like, well, I'll just join them all and see who wants me, because I've got a lot of things to say. I ended up being involved in, still to this day, foreign affairs and trade and agriculture, which makes sense. There's a few others. I just went to one and I was like, nah, I can't help you. You don't want me here. I was just joking. And then, but I was like, none of this is policy. This isn't going to help me get into Parliament House in Canberra. I was like, how do I become an MP? And they said, oh, you need to join your local branch. And there's a local branch for federal and state. So I went to the branch meeting, and they were having elections, you could say, for like the chair, the secretary. And they were like, and I was like, oh, I'm on the Policy Standing Committee. And they're like, oh, you should be our secretary, because they want someone there. And I was like, okay. Turns out the secretary, it's a good spot to be in these branches, because the chair, it's like a figurehead. People do it for ego, I swear. Same with deputy chair. But secretary, that's where all the information moves. You're the one talking to your membership. You're the one who everyone knows.
Yeah.
So did that. And I was like, this will be the seat, because it's kind of like progressive. I'm conservative, but I'm an environmentalist, which apparently is a hard match. And I also have some social leanings, a lot. So it's kind of like a mishmash of some of this party, which makes it tricky.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like, I'm going to run for this seat. And someone called me from another part of the country, a sitting member or a senator, someone up there, saying, this is more your style. So I went up there, and it's called pre-selection. That's where your party votes to be, if they want you to be their candidate, get chosen, then the population votes to send you to Canberra. And because these electorates are huge, like the size of some countries, you do a 3-day speaking tour and you get to speak your mind. And because I had all these inbuilt belief systems about the importance of family values and the destruction of the family unit, about how Australia should be self-sufficient, and the fact that we're a pile of treasure in the middle of the Pacific, that through history we had America defending us. We had Britain defending us, then America defending us. It was like, we need to defend ourselves. And so because when you have these belief systems, you don't need a speech. So I just stood up and talked. And it resonated with people, but they could sense the passion and also the immaturity, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So really enjoyed that. Obviously didn't get the pre-selection, which in hindsight was a bullet dodged. But the federal member there, he said, come work for me. Come be my speechwriter and media advisor. You'll understand what you're wanting to get into. So I did that for 6 months to a year. So you get the full experience of federal politics without having to be the federal member.
Yeah.
Man, that was an eye-opening experience. If I had gotten pre-selected and gotten elected, you go to Canberra, and if you're a backbencher, you just sit on your hands, do the speeches you're told to say, vote on what you're supposed to vote on. And if you make a lot of noise, you'll make a lot of enemies or a lot of friends. But it's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. You're glad it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to originally.
For now, I feel like you don't want to go in politics. If you go from the bottom up, you become one of them, basically. And by the time you get to the top, you are one of those classic politicians that everyone hates.
Yeah.
But if you are able
because the system created you, essentially.
Exactly. But if you can come from the top down, from the outside, you can actually affect change without falling into their traps, basically.
Sure. Okay, well, let's get into. Okay, so now you have. So is this like is this a step before this technologies company that you run now?
Yeah. So this was. So I spent COVID in Cambodia. Just got the hell out of Australia, so we didn't have to do all the lockdown and all of that business.
Yeah.
And it was after that. The only reason I came back is to run through that pre-selection campaign. So then 22, I was working for the member, and then finished up, and I was like, not interested in politics. Technology. I've seen the world. I've seen the third world where all these resources exist. And when I was in Cambodia, discovered one, the sprouted coconuts I mentioned earlier, but also this gemstone. And I was shocked. I was like, why has no one ever heard of this? Before I tell you its name, it's the oldest single item on Earth. There is nothing on Earth older than this stone. It's used to study the very origins of Earth because it can survive the rock cycles. It goes down to the core and comes back up. It has double refraction. So compared to diamond has single refraction. So light comes in, splits once, you get your brilliance or your fire. This one, it splits twice. So you get twice the brilliance, twice the fire. So it's the oldest stone on Earth, double refraction, and it's obscenely rare. The only place you can get this stone is in the remote jungles of Cambodia and a bit of Vietnam. So I went there and I dug some out of the ground. They come out of the ground like this reddish rock. Get some that are naturally green. And this process of heat treating to get them to go blue. So the rarest, most beautiful ones are these blue ones. Man, I don't know if that's going to show.
Yeah, I can see.
They're absolutely beautiful. And so I got a handful of these, and I spent a few months in these hotels we were staying at trying to get them to turn blue because you have to heat treat at a particular temperature and particular conditions. I was trying to do it with charcoal and teapots and to get it hot enough. I just couldn't get it until finally, after months, I got them to turn blue. I was like, yippee, like that Eureka guy who jumps out of his bathtub and runs down the street.
Yeah.
That was me. And then, so by this point, we could get across into Thailand because the world was still locked down, but we made it across and I got them faceted into actual gemstones and listed them on like eBay or something and for like $70. I was like, hang on, I dug these things out of the ground for 30 cents.
Yeah.
And now coming back to the stone itself, I was like, I don't think these things are worth $70 because let's say, are they superior to diamond? Hardness? No. Diamond has always been an industrial material. Refraction? Yes. Scarcity? Yes. Age? Double yes.
Yeah.
I call diamonds common carbon because I was in Africa on the Orange River there and they wash up on the beaches. So you've got soldiers there guarding it because they're so common. I was like, yeah, these things aren't worth $70 a carat. I think they're worth something closer to diamonds. So I just started buying them up, like the raw ones, as many as I could get. I was carrying around like 50 kilos of these on my back for the duration of COVID. So I got pretty fit. Then when I came back to Australia in this, again, I was stuck in an office with this working with this MP. Such a waste of time and resources. A speech takes like 20 minutes. Then what do you do? So obviously not on the government's dime, in my own time during this period, I started buying these stones off the internet. And I set a bot to find out how many are out there. It's like $1 million could buy them all, the ones that are available. So I started a little Telegram group, just anonymous people off the internet. I just gave them a taste of what I told you. I didn't tell them the name of the stone. I said, I found a commodity, which I think with limited resources, we can corner and revalue. Built up like a few hundred people. And I told them, the name of this stone is blue zircon. Now, that's the ick factor. So I always went into jewelry stores and I said, hey, do you have any zircon? And they always just look at me like, no, that's trash. It's like, no, not zirconia, not cubic zirconia, blue zircon. It's the oldest stone on Earth. I'm like, no, we haven't heard of it. The only place you can find it is in Tiffany & Co. because they tried this same thing like 100 years ago. This guy called George Kuntz, who's a mate of Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde loved this stone as well. He's got some quotes about it. Because, my dear George, I think I prefer this to all your other ones. They tried it. Again, the ick factor, people didn't like it. I was like, in the 21st century. So got the group buying. And then so we moved the per carat price from $30 to $70, I think up to like $200. And then, and this time I was also buying them up from the mines in Cambodia. And then suddenly the mines were all made illegal. The government said these mines are closing. So a stone which was previously extremely scarce and extremely rare, all the mines are closed. There was simultaneously a change in leadership in the country. So that worked in our favor. And then so the next step is, okay, we've bought it all. Now we need to remarket this. But then from a business point of view, it's like, well, do I really, like, I loved building the brand. The brand I created was NY Blue. It's a luxury brand. Love the packaging. And I love that I know all of our stones are the highest quality. And I know that they're all real because I got them out of the ground, but they're still GIA certified. Do I want to get into the gemstone business? Because it feels like I'm doing that, ending up in the hair salon business again. I was like, there has to be a way to take advantage of the rally in this price. Because I also saw this same rally in another stone, tanzanite from Tanzania, not as beautiful, not as rare, but scarce because the mines are running out. And it just went like that. And I was like, how can we monetize this rally without having to ship these stones around the world? And so the decision was made that we'll release a resource-backed currency, a real-world asset, backed one-to-one with these stones. So every single token is backed by a single 1 carat blue zircon of the highest quality. So we set aside 1 million carats, these stones, and we'll mint 1 million tokens. Not all of them will be released. And that way, people can buy the tokens and be exposed to the real world rally and the associated token because they're redeemable. You can always redeem your token for a stone. So it would never be a meme coin that goes to zero because it's always backed by a physical, real asset. And then so we take the revenue from the crypto sale to take it to the, I don't know, I'll just pick two opposing names, the Kim Kardashians and the Kanye Wests of the world. And they can go on stage and say, diamonds are trash, common carbon. If you want to buy your girlfriend something which is the most common stone on earth, go for it. Or if you want to buy them something that is the oldest stone on earth, obscenely rare and twice as beautiful, you want this one. Because it doesn't just come in blue. It also comes in like clear. And these things are, if you put them side by side with a diamond, you're going to take these ones every day of the week because of the double refraction. So then once we get the influences of the world to start recognizing that perhaps there's a stone that no one else has heard of, then you'll see a pivot. And then you've got your geopolitics at play. This is a very Asian stone. And we can see the whole world is like this fight almost between East and West at the moment. This will probably fall into that. So we haven't released the token yet. We've just released the white paper. So we're still working towards releasing that.
When, at what point do you think you guys would be ready to, like, somebody would be able to actually purchase the coin?
I think within 2 months. So I'm not sure when this is going to go out. Perhaps this will be out once the stone goes on
should
sale.
be the next couple of weeks. It'll be before May.
Yeah. So perhaps because we're just getting our ducks in a row. For starters, we need trustees. So we've got a trustee in Cambodia for our assets there because they can't be in our possession. Any stones that are backed in this currency have to be with a trusted third party. In Australia, we use a company that does superannuation assets so that it's always in their custody and not ours. So it's perpetually audited. And then when people who do want to redeem, they can come into our offices and take from our stockpile, and then we can reallocate that way. So we're getting those in a row. We're getting the technology stack figured out. But yeah, I think within 2 months, then that's when this is going to go on sale.
Where can we go to make sure that we are like notified or that we know even how to go pick it up when it does release?
Yeah, the main website for this is zir.co.nz. I think you guys use zir.co.nz, or they'll probably pop up on nyblue.com as well.
Okay.
And currently you can go there today and join the mailing list, and that's how you can stay informed.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So yeah, if this sounds interesting to you, if this conversation has piqued your interest and you are curious about how to get your hands on some of this crypto that will actually be backed with a really rare stone like this, then NY Blue, like New York, nyblue.com. Go over there, sign up for their mailing list so that you can be notified when this is available. Mitch, what's next for you, bro? Like what's got you pumped for the future?
It's all about Selenial. That's the distributed commodity supply chain platform. I, along with the rest of my generation, I assume people want to know where their food comes from, where their resources come from. And also, we're trying to fix waste resources. Selenial is how we came across this stone. The algorithm looks for commodities that are underappreciated somewhere, very appreciated somewhere else, such as gemstones, sprouted coconuts, or waste protein. So we create the Selenial platform allows anyone to list commodities for other users to then buy those commodities, transit them to a value-adding process, and then create a product. For example, one of our we have 3 example supply chain. Selenial's in-house, but it's going to be open to the public in probably 6 months to a year. So we're creating 3 example supply chains to show people how it works. Okay. We've got the stones, which I've told you about. We'll say waste protein. Waste protein is everywhere in the world. If it's food scraps from the table, in a lot of countries who get a lot of haircuts, there's big piles of human hair outside of the cities that governments don't know what to deal with. They pollute. That's a commodity. In Cambodia and a lot of countries, I saw plastic everywhere. In Egypt, the pyramids are surrounded by plastic. No one talks about that. Then if you can create a value proposition for that commodity, then you can list it and other people will buy it. For example, one of our supply chains, it's a life extension company, because that's very important to me, is we need to be living longer than 100 years. And I was like, well, this is perfect for the selenial supply chain, because NAC, it's a perfect life extension product, N-acetylcysteine. It's made from amino acids. Where do amino acids come from? Protein. So you can find waste protein, break it down into the amino acids, package it up nicely, and then you've got a product there. And I also want products that I consume to be the best, because I'm going to be consuming them. And you learn so much. For example, these supplements. So this is the NAC range, discipline range. Whenever you get NAC, it comes in a powder form and it tastes disgusting. Have you ever tried NAC?
No, I haven't.
It tastes disgusting. So I was like, these things need to be in capsules. So for starters, we put it in capsules, and of course you have to go with the cool colors of the, because we do NAC, NMN, taurine. The NMN's pink, the taurine's green. And when I was talking to our factory about putting this in capsules, they said, how much starch do you want to use? I said, what do you mean starch? And they go, you have to cut it with starch, otherwise your capsules are only going to be half full. I'm like, I don't want anything. I want it to be pure. And they go, okay, it's just going to look weird. I was like, I don't care. I was like, does anyone else not cut it with starch? And they go, no. I go, so you're saying every single thing that's in a capsule is mostly starch with a bit of active ingredient? And they go, yeah. I go, no, I don't want any of that. And it's things like that really make a product. And when you scan the barcode and you can see the entire supply chain of where it came from, that's the future for me, building supply chains, but democratizing supply chains. So instead of there being multinationals moving your food from A to B, you can make your own supply chains for everything you consume. So if it's from your honey, through your clothes, you go to the source or some other supply chain that someone else has built, copy paste, so that everything that you eat, use, or consume is your own supply chain and you have control over it. That's my ultimate goal, probably for the next 10, 15, 20 years of my life.
Well, dude, Mitch, this has been a fascinating conversation. I genuinely appreciate you coming on the show. Before we take off here, where can people find out more about you? Where can they get in contact with Mitch, learn more about what you're up to?
Probably my LinkedIn, or depends what you want. Business is LinkedIn. I've got a Facebook page where I put my political belief systems, which I'm sure everyone will agree with. No plastic in the food supply. Look after the family in it. It's the most important political entity in the world. Or if you want to see me floating around the world taking pretty pictures, have a look at Instagram. But yeah, Google Mitch Brownlie.
What's the IG handle?
Oh, it'd be Mitch Brownlie, I assume.
Just at Mitch Brownlie.
Yeah. Just Google Mitch Brownlie.
That's BROWNLIE, Mitch Brownlie.
Correct.
If you're listening to this.
Same with Facebook /Mitch Brownlie, LinkedIn Mitch Brownlie.
Perfect. So go check out some of the stuff that Mitch has got going on. Go to nyblue.com, sign up for the updates for that new token that's coming out. And yeah, go learn a little bit more about Mitch. He's obviously lived a fascinating life, has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, and I'm sure you will not regret continuing to learn from him. So Mitch, thanks so much for taking the time, man. This is a blast.
Thanks, Travis. This has been fun. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate the conversation.